Nobody is afraid of cows. That is exactly the problem. You have driven past them your entire life. Slow, docile, standing in fields, chewing. They look like furniture. They look like background. They look like the last animal on earth that could ever hurt you. And that assumption, that comfortable, universal, completely unchallenged assumption, is why cows kill more people every single year than sharks, wolves, and bears combined. Read that again. More than sharks, more than wolves, more than bears. The animal you never thought twice about is statistically one of the most dangerous large animals a human being can encounter. And the reason most people never know this is because nobody survives a shark attack quietly. But people die from cow attacks every week, and the world barely notices. This is the story of what cows actually are, and why the pasture you casually walked through on a country holiday may have been the most dangerous place you visited that year. An adult domestic cow weighs between 1,000 and 500 pounds on average. A large bull can exceed 2,000 pounds. That is one full ton of animals. When something that weighs a ton decides to move toward you at speed, the physics become immediately and completely unsurvivable. A cow at full charge reaches speeds of approximately 25 miles per hour. The average human sprinting at full effort reaches around 15. You cannot outrun a charging cow. Not on flat ground, not across a field, not ever. The horns are a separate issue entirely. Not all cattle have them, but those that do carry weapons that have been measured at lengths exceeding 36 inches in certain breeds. The force behind a horn strike from a 1,500-pound animal moving at speed is not comparable to anything in ordinary human experience. It is not like being stabbed. The structural damage is categorically different. Penetrating abdominal trauma, shattered rib cages, crushed pelvic structures. Pathology reports from cow-related fatalities read like descriptions of high-speed vehicle collisions. Even without horns, the hooves are enough. A cow's hoof strike delivers force measured in thousands of pounds per square inch. Animals that have been trampled by cattle are found with injuries consistent with being run over by heavy machinery. Because in mechanical terms, that is exactly what happened. Cows are not stupid. This is the foundational misunderstanding that gets people killed. The image of the slow, blank-eyed grazing animal has been so thoroughly absorbed into cultural consciousness that the actual cognitive and emotional complexity of cattle has been almost completely erased from public awareness. Research in animal cognition has documented that cattle have long-term memory, form lasting social bonds, experience measurable emotional states including fear, excitement, and grief, and demonstrate the ability to learn from observation. They remember. Cows remember which humans have treated them badly. They remember locations where frightening things happened. They remember the smell of blood, the sound of machinery associated with pain, the specific individuals who caused them. Stress. A cow that was mistreated 6 months ago by a person wearing a red jacket may react with immediate aggression to any person wearing a red jacket 6 months later. This is documented behavior. It has been observed and recorded in agricultural research settings. Memory plus 1,000 pounds of muscle is a combination that deserves considerably more respect than it receives. Cattle also have a defined concept of personal space that researchers call the flight zone. It is the invisible boundary around an animal within which it feels threatened if a stranger enters without warning. The size of the flight zone varies by individual and by how habituated the animal is to human contact. In beef cattle with limited human handling, the flight zone can extend to 25 feet or more. Cross that boundary too quickly, approach from the wrong angle, or cut off the animal's perceived escape route, and the fear response triggers instantly. And here's the critical thing about fear in cattle. Fear does not always produce flight. In cattle, when the flight response is blocked, either because the animal is cornered, protecting young, or simply assesses that it cannot escape, the fear response converts directly into aggression. The animal does not have a graduated middle option. It goes from fearful to lethal with nothing in between. This is why the circumstances of most fatal cattle attacks follow a consistent pattern. A person enters a field, the cattle do not immediately react. The person walks closer, perhaps not even toward the animals directly, simply crossing the space. At some point, without any signal, the person recognizes as a warning, one animal charges. By the time the human understands what is happening, the distance is closed. The warning signs were there. The human simply did not speak cattle. Tail switching, head lowering, pawing at the ground, a fixed stare, ears pinned back, the animal turning its body to face you directly. These are the pre-charge signals that anyone experienced with cattle reads immediately, and anyone without that experience reads as nothing at all. The animal telegraphs its intention. The untrained observer sees a cow standing in a field. Mothers are the most dangerous category by a significant margin. A cow with a calf nearby is operating in a neurological state that has no equivalent in the domestic animals most people are familiar with. The maternal protection drive in cattle is not a gentle preference for staying close to offspring. It is a hair-trigger biological imperative that overrides every other behavioral tendency the animal has. Cows that are normally placid and well habituated to human handling have killed experienced farmers who walked between them and their calves without thinking twice. In the United Kingdom, where cattle-related fatalities are tracked with unusual rigor, cows with calves account for the overwhelming majority of fatal attacks on humans. The victims are not ignorant tourists who did not know better. The majority are farmers and rural workers with years of experience. People who knew these animals. People who had walked these fields hundreds of times. Who misjudged one moment of proximity to one calf and did not survive the next 30 seconds. The bull is a different category of danger entirely. An adult bull in rut is an animal experiencing a hormonal state that fundamentally alters its behavioral profile. Testosterone surges that would be clinically extraordinary in any other context become baseline for a bull during breeding season. The aggression threshold drops to near zero. Animals that are manageable and predictable outside of rut become genuinely unpredictable and potentially explosive during it. Experienced cattle handlers treat rutting bulls with the same caution they would apply to any large, volatile, unpredictably dangerous animal. The problem is that most people who encounter bulls in fields are not experienced cattle handlers. They are hikers, walkers, cyclists, and tourists who see a large animal and apply the same mental category they applied to every cow they have ever safely passed. They do not know which animal is in rut. They do not know its history. They do not know its flight zone, its triggers, or its behavioral baseline. In agricultural regions across the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Australia, signage warning about bulls in fields has become a standard regulatory requirement precisely because the public repeatedly underestimated the danger and people died. The warning signs are not bureaucratic caution. They are the product of specific, documented fatal incidents that forced regulatory responses. One particularly disturbing pattern appears consistently across multiple countries and decades. The victim enters a field. The bull charges from a distance. The victim attempts to escape. They reach a boundary fence or gate that they cannot cross quickly enough. They are caught in that moment of vulnerability, at the fence, attempting to climb, partially through. And that is where the fatal injuries occur. The animal targets the back, the legs, the exposed body of someone in the process of escape. Researchers who study predatory and defensive aggression in large mammals note that cattle show a consistent behavioral tendency to pursue and continue attacking a target that is retreating or down. Unlike some animals that disengage once a threat has been neutralized, cattle have been documented continuing to trample and gore a fallen human long after any threat has been eliminated. This is consistent with the defensive aggression profile. The neurological trigger that initiated the attack does not receive a clear-off signal until the perceived threat has been completely removed from the animal's environment, which means getting away is not enough. Getting far enough away, fast enough, is everything. And as established, the speed differential makes that nearly impossible once a charge has begun. There's a particular cruelty in the geography of cattle attacks. They almost always happen in open space, in fields where help is not close, where the nearest person who might hear you is hundreds of meters away, where the terrain is uneven and fence lines are the only potential barriers between you and an animal that can reach you in seconds. The isolation of the agricultural landscape, which feels peaceful and safe to a visitor, is exactly what makes the danger so complete when something goes wrong. Emergency response data from rural areas consistently shows extended response times for farm-related incidents. By the time help arrives, the critical window is long past. The outcomes in cattle attack cases that receive emergency medical attention are often determined not by the quality of care, but by how long the victim lay in that field before anyone found them. The world does not make movies about cow attacks. There are no documentary series about the terror of the pasture, no cultural shorthand that triggers the appropriate level of caution when someone approaches a field of cattle. The danger is invisible because it does not fit the story we tell about these animals. But the data does not care about the story. In the United States alone, approximately 22 people are killed by cattle every year. That figure has remained consistent across decades of agricultural reporting. It does not spike and recede like shark fatalities tied to specific incidents. It is steady, reliable, a constant background drumbeat of deaths that accumulates year after year in the statistical silence of the rural world. 22 people. Every year. Killed by the animal you drove past this morning without a second thought. The last thing to understand is perhaps the most important. The danger is not going to announce itself. It is not going to look dangerous. It is going to look exactly like it always has. A field, some cows, a perfectly ordinary afternoon in the countryside. And somewhere in that image, an animal with 1,000 pounds behind it and no obligation to warn you before it closes the distance forever. The pasture has always been this dangerous. You just finally know it now.